Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show. Hello, everybody. I apologize. Wanting to start off the top of this show by apologizing that we are way behind schedule for today. Busy day at the rink. Chris MacFarland spoke. Busy day in the locker room. And then I'm also going to be 100% real and honest with everyone watching right now. Case of the Mondays today for your boy here. Garage door broke this morning. I've had garage doors break dozens of times in my life, growing up at my parents' house, past homes I've lived in. And hey, look, it's always an inconvenience. Got to get the tension in the springs, a little bit of a dangerous thing to be working with. So I was like, we'll get this taken care of. We'll get the car out of here. We'll figure everything else out. Later, we had a feeling this was coming. My wife and I had a feeling this was coming with the garage, that it was going to be going soon. Today was the day our garage is wedged. Cannot get my car out. So, car is fully stuck. So my dad came over, was helping me out, trying to get the garage door open. So it has been a Monday, but none of you care about any of that. Here to talk trade deadline. Just me today, kind of. We're going to hear from Chris MacFarland a bit. And then I also caught up with Evan Rawal and Aarif Deen today after practice. So I'll be running that for you as well to end the show. That'll be about a 25, 30 minute segment there. Where I'll be joined by a couple different fantastic reporters here in Colorado who cover the Colorado Avalanche for the Denver Gazette and for Colorado Hockey Now. So we'll have them joining me here in just a little bit to break that all down. But busy week ahead for the Colorado Avalanche after what has been a busy last couple weeks. Lots of roster movement, lots of roster shakeup as Chris MacFarland continues to look to get his team dialed in to where he thinks they can contend for a Stanley Cup. He did tell us today at practice, after practice, that the team is not satisfied. They do still think that they have some improvement that is to be had. That the roster isn't quite where they want it to be. Now, look, Chris MacFarland, we knew he wasn't going to be super forthcoming. It's part of why, we always laugh a little bit. Hey, I am never going to complain. This organization, the Colorado Avalanche, went a long time without making GMs available during the season outside of very specific moments here and there. So, hey, I'm never going to turn my nose up at the opportunity to speak with Chris MacFarland. He's always great to chat with. In general, always got a lot to say, always has interesting tidbits for us. And I actually felt like that was maybe a little bit more true today than what we normally see. But we do also always laugh a little bit because, look, the trade deadline's in 4 days. Chris MacFarland is not going to come out and give us, as he shouldn't, a lot of information today about what the team is wanting to do, what they are looking at, what's in the pipeline. So look, today is always a day where it's a little bit interesting. We've got to kind of glean what we can out of what Chris MacFarland is willing to talk to us about. And one of the things that really I wasn't expecting to be a big topic of conversation today, but ended up being something that I thought ended up being noteworthy was another update on Gabe Landeskog. Look, folks, I'm just going to be honest. From my perspective, this was one of the more, the word that you'll hear me use when talking to Evan and Aarif is sobering. I thought this was one of the more sobering updates that we've received so far on Gabe Landeskog, where, at least in my opinion, Chris MacFarland seems like he is trying to temper expectations for the first time. I don't think we've really heard them do this. And again, maybe keep in mind, this is just my take on it. And this is just my take on what we heard from C-Mac. And the tone that was used, some of the word choice. Typically, it feels like when we are getting a Gabe Landeskog update, to me, it's always maybe even overly positive of a spin at times. Something where it really feels like they are talking in terms of, hey, right around the corner, when we all know that there's a lot of steps to be taken here. This was the first time today, guys, that it felt to me like Chris MacFarland, like I said, was tempering expectations and was being very real with where Gabe Landeskog is at and what they are looking at. And I mean, he called into focus a couple of times that, hey, look, this is March 2025. Gabe's not even back out there with the team. And, you know, he said, look, we didn't think that this would be a 3-year injury when it happened. He, of course, left the door open saying, yeah, you know, Gabe has earned the right. And I'm going to give you guys a chance to hear what Chris MacFarland had to say himself about Gabe Landeskog. But that was one of the more interesting notes that I did think came out of today, was that, yeah, Chris MacFarland definitely made it known. This is the room we're in, and these are the cards we've been dealt, and this is how we're trying to handle things. We, of course, did also talk to him a bit about the upcoming trade deadline and what the group might be looking to add. I also talked to him a bit about what they saw from Ryan Lindgren. And I thought the responses that we got from Jared Bednar yesterday and Ryan Lindgren today were the exact, it was what you wanted to hear. Because look, guys, Megan and I came out and we did an emergency pod right after the trade happened. And Megan and I were both defending the trade. And I stand by that to this moment right here, that I think this is a move that is not as black and white as it seems on the surface. The Avs did not bring in Ryan Lindgren for him and Cale Makar to become the new top pairing, set and forget. This is who we're rolling with every night as our top guys. That's not what happened here. They brought in Ryan Lindgren to be a depth add on the back end. And my guess is that they have another move for the defense in the pipeline that they're at least trying to get over the finish line. That's another thing to keep in mind here. As you do listen to what Chris MacFarland had to say, as you hear the conversations that I had with Evan Rawal and Aarif Deen this afternoon, excuse me, one thing I mentioned to Aarif is I think there's going to be a lot they're going to try to do. As I'm going to choke here. What they're able to get done, we'll see. I asked Chris MacFarland about the expectations and the amount of moves they've made. Let's hear what he had to say.
You've had just almost an unprecedented amount of turnover with your team this year for a team that is trying to win the Stanley Cup. Certainly, like, thinks this is going to be like 44 guys. Just what has this been like? What has this year been like compared to some of the previous?
Well, I think a good chunk of that too has been we've been banged up, right? We haven't, for whatever reason, we haven't had, you know, whether it's the best of luck with health or just that's just hockey, right? It's certainly not by design. You know, I think the trades were just moves that it's just one of those years where we felt we had to tweak some things, and certainly not something you go in every year hoping that you have to, you know, make a multitude of trades, but it's just one of those years, Corey, and I think, you know, we'll see if we have one more in us this week or not, but again, it's all done in light of improving our situation. So,
So with that, you know, you guys have been one of the more active teams in the last 2 seasons, you know, being aggressive and you know, fixing parts of the roster you don't like, adding, you know, kind of similar to the way that the organization was back in the early 2000s and the 90s. Is this just a you know, symbol of where the organization is at? You got Nathan McKinney, you got Cale Makar. You want to be aggressive in approaching this roster? Is it what you were just saying? You know, just the circumstances have kind of fallen in the perfect place where you've had to make deals.
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously when you have, you know, the superstar players that you have, there's an expectation, right, that you're, like you guys said it, you're a contender, right? You know, are you every year? Can you do this every year in perpetuity? No. You know, there's going to come a time where we're going to have to recoup those assets because you need the young players. You do. So it's a fine line, and it's something we talk about continuously, but we do feel that as long as we have a chance to get one of those 8 tickets in the Western Conference, and then, hopefully then be dangerous, and then a lot comes down to health, right? You can have all the good players in the world. They got to be healthy at the right time of the year too. So
that's something to keep in mind. It's the health. It feels a little bit like there's been so much turnover, and you guys heard Corey Masisak there ask about the sheer number of players that have been used for the Avs in the lineup this year. You have to be healthy. Everything has to come together right. So there maybe feels like more turnover this season than there's actually been. But look, I wanted to follow up and ask Chris MacFarland about how aggressive this team has been for decades. Decades. This organization went with, hey, we like our team. We're not going to do anything crazy to mortgage the future, to make a small move right now that we think could help make us marginally better. Hey, we're we like the group we have. We don't want to mess with it. I mean, we like our group kind of became like a running joke among Avs Twitter for several years, that the team did not have a ton of interest in going out and being hyper aggressive and making big ads and things like that. Well, that's what they've done. Go all the way back to 2022 when they had a pretty splashy deadline. It's been pretty consistent. Maybe that year after the Cup, when there was still so much uncertainty around what was happening with Gabe Landeskog, maybe there wasn't as much of what's felt like a chips to the middle type mentality. But I mean, no question, no doubt, this team has been significantly more aggressive than what we've come to be used to over the last 5 to 10 years leading up to it. And I just can't help but feel like when you step back and look at this roster and look at some of the names that they have, to me, Chris MacFarland's in a funny spot, because it is no doubt you have a roster and you have players that it feels you need to be pushing the chips to the middle. There's the famous example of, the Pittsburgh Penguins. They basically have an internal rule that was put forward by the ownership group. If 87 and 71 are on your roster, that's a year that we are going to make moves to try to put ourselves in contention. Now, obviously, 20 years later, exactly 20 years later since Sidney Crosby came into the NHL. It's looking like that might have finally caught up with them. It might finally be running out. But you do imagine that right now, the message internally from ownership, from management, is, hey, 29 and 8 are here. We need to be going for it. And if we find ourselves in a situation where we don't think we have the roster to compete, we are going to make changes to address that and bring players in, or, like we've seen on multiple instances recently, take players out to make this work. I think that's what Chris MacFarland has done. I think he sees what you've seen us talk about in the last couple of weeks. This is a team that is not perfect, is not, ready to go in and compete for a Stanley Cup right now tonight, maybe, but a couple of tweaks here and there, an addition, a little bit of added depth, things like that. I don't think this team is that far off. And Evan Rawal, who we're going to talk to here in just a little bit, doesn't think so either. So, okay, if you're Chris MacFarland, you're looking at this and saying, we're not that far off. What changes can we make to help improve this team? And truthfully, we're not going to be overly concerned right now with what those assets are. You guys heard him say it. He knows. They understand. We're going to have to recoup those assets. We're going to, at some point, have to restock the cupboards with picks and prospects and things like that. But that is just not where the organization is at. And the reason why I say he's in a tough spot, because there's parts of the fan base, rightfully, that are looking at how many assets they've paid, how bare the cupboards are theoretically in terms of, high value assets that other teams would have interest in terms of trade pieces. And they're looking at that and saying, why are we giving up so much to try to marginally improve the roster? It's a fair question. However, if Chris MacFarland was going out and not making any moves and just saying, we don't think that there's tangible large upgrades to be had, so we're just going to stand pat, roll with what our guys have, and move forward. Well, the pressure that would be coming from the outside, also rightfully, would be, why are you letting years of Cale Makar, Nathan MacKinnon in their prime pass you by without making reasonable, legitimate moves to help improve the roster to get you back closer to recapturing the Stanley Cup like you did just a few seasons ago? So there's a delicate line to walk here, and there's a balance that Chris MacFarland is trying to strike. Do we make the moves that we think can improve us right now today to help give our team and our star players a chance at winning another Stanley Cup, regardless of what happens with Gabe Landeskog? Or do we try to be responsible and hold on to these picks, hold on to these prospects, and strike only when we think the moment is right? I think a point that you're going to hear Evan bring up in just a little bit. I think if you're going to do it the way that the Avs are doing it, which is striking and trying to build a team that can compete this year, that can make a run for a Stanley Cup this year, I think this is your chance to do it. The flat cap over the last handful of seasons before we finally saw a little bit of movement this past summer, and then well reported and now confirmed legitimate large movement in the cap this upcoming summer. The flat cap has really had an effect on the league that we haven't ever seen before. There is more parity than ever. There are more teams all kind of lumped into this maybe group than ever. And truthfully, even your teams at the tippy top, Washington, Winnipeg, do either of those teams to anybody out there scare you to the extent where it's like, oh man, as long as we don't get the Jets in the playoffs, oh man, as long as we don't run across the Caps? And those are really the two teams that are pulling away in their respective conferences. I think the Avs are stepping back and looking at this going, we got to get in and we've got to have a team that we think can compete, and we got to have some depth. If we've got those things, we got as good a chance as anybody, and maybe an even better chance because you have the best defenseman in the world, and you have what can be an argument on any given day right now, just the best current player in the world in Nathan MacKinnon. I think when you understand that context of your options are let it pass you by in a season where it is more wide open than arguably the NHL has ever been, you let it pass you by because you think there might be one too many moves to make, and you want to hold on to those assets, and you want to hold on to your picks and your prospects. Every time my phone lights up, I got to double check. I apologize, guys. So that's option one. You hold on to it and wait till, your situation's maybe a little bit better. You have more clarity around Gabe Landeskog. Okay. I don't know if people would be happy about that. If you let another year of Cale Makar, Nathan MacKinnon prime pass you by, or your other option is continue to push the chips to the middle and make do with the assets that you've got and the players that are available, and do what they are doing with Ryan Lindgren that we've now both heard Jared Bednar and Chris MacFarland point out. Yeah, the analytic numbers aren't great. If you're just going to judge Ryan Lindgren based on the analytic numbers, you're going to have a leg to stand on that it has not been impressive. But if you're going to watch Ryan Lindgren's game, take into account what he does well, what the Avs are looking for him to be, then yeah, it's going to make sense. And that's a move that I think could end up paying real dividends for this team in very short order as we get into the playoffs. If you suddenly have Ryan Lindgren who can, get somewhere back to the mean of the type of player he is, the middle, the type of player he is, suddenly if you can roll him out, being deployed away from Devon Toews, Cale Makar, that could be a real asset for you. Not to mention he's mean. He's a little bit nasty. He's hard to play against in front of the net. Chris MacFarland today used the phrase warrior mentality, that was what originally drew them to Ryan Lindgren, and said that was something that this team in their current makeup just did not have. So if they're making, smart, savvy moves like that, leaving themselves cap space available to play with, and then if between now and Friday they want to get a little bit frisky and flip a Casey Middlestat for a Ryan O'Reilly, bring in a Brad Marchand as you send some money out. And obviously those are two swings that I'm talking about that are higher on the list of, what would be noteworthy type moves. I'm not saying that the Avs necessarily go out and do either of those things in particular. But if you can make moves like what they did with Ryan Lindgren that you feel can provide real value for you down your lineup as you get into the playoffs, if you can pair that with a move like something in the ballpark of what I said, I think you're really, really happy with what you've done. Not to mention, they also seem pretty high on what Jimmy Vesey can bring in a specific role. They are not asking Jimmy Vesey to come in here and score 15 to 20 goals. They're asking him to come in, be a responsible player that can be trusted on the defensive side of the puck and kill penalties. If you watched the playoffs last year, Stanley Cup Finals in particular, you understand just how important special teams are. The Edmonton Oilers were near automatic on the power play, and when they weren't, it was near impossible to score on them on the penalty kill. The Avs are saying, can we bolster this penalty kill? Can we make ourselves, a team that even when you're down a man is not a freebie goal against? Can we do that through building our teams, in specific ways, in combination with the high-end offensive punch that we've got at the top? Can we become a difficult team to play against that's got depth and the high-end talent? And the idea with a player like Ryan Lindgren is, can we have someone that we think is maybe going to be cast in a role that's a little bit below what the normal expectation for that player would be? That's what I think they're looking at here. They're finding they feel like they should be going all in. We've got 29-8. Regardless of what number 92 is doing, we've got 29 and we've got 8 in our lineup every night. And that means that we need to be pushing the chips to the middle and going all in. I'm going to do a couple things here. I'm going to play the clip from Chris MacFarland talking about Gabe Landeskog, because I get into a bit with Evan Rawal and then again with Aarif Deen. And I want you guys to have that context of what exactly was said about Gabe Landeskog and where are we at with that. And we're going to come back, and then I'm going to throw to that part of the show where we're going to hear from Evan and Aarif. And what's interesting is they've got two kind of conflicting ideas of how they see the rest of this week playing out. And it's part of what I find so interesting is what Evan and I talk about is it's consistent. The Avs are going to be making a lot of calls. Chris MacFarland has shown over the last handful of years, especially this regime, Chris MacFarland, Joe Sakic, if there's a deal to be made, if there's a big name player out there, the Avs are at least going to be in on it. They're at least going to see what it's going to cost to improve the team via that player. Evan thinks that the Avs, while all that's getting done, maybe won't be able to get much across the finish line. Aarif's got a little bit of a different perspective on it. And we referenced the Toronto Maple Leafs team from 2 seasons ago at the deadline, who turned over what felt like half their forward core before heading into the playoffs, and it did eventually result in them finally winning a round. Now, I just saw this comment come through the chat here. CMAX said they want to do more. Yes, I don't have that clip pulled for you guys. Chris MacFarland did say the team is not satisfied with where the roster is at, that they're going to continue to try to make improvements between now and Friday. So I'm going to play that clip from Chris MacFarland. But first, I did notice some savvy eyeballs there in the chat. Yes, this is Jurassic Park 1, 2, and 3, all on VHS. Got the Lost World in there. I've also got both Tim Burton Batmans on VHS, as well as Attack of the Clones back there. And then Indian in the cupboard, just because that was a great find. But yes, got some good stuff on the shelves back here. Thank you for noticing. Very happy with my shelves behind me. But let's hear from Chris MacFarland. We're going to give you guys a little bit of context here before you hear us talk about Gabe Landeskog, me, Evan Rawal, and Aarif Deen. Let's give you the context. A couple different questions. What Chris MacFarland had to say today is the latest on Colorado Avalanche captain Gabe Landeskog.
Have the latest on Gabriel Landeskog, and with that, obviously, how much he factors into when you're making moves like this.
Yeah, no, Gabe continues to rehab. I think things are he's doing good. He's doing, he's grinding hard every single day, but I don't foresee him joining practice like in the next day or two or week or two here. So, I mean, I think you guys can figure out where this is kind of going, but hopefully it'll keep going well.
You're talking about Landeskog, that we think we know kind of where this is going. Is that kind of just a sign that he might not be playing this year, or is there a sign?
Yeah, I think there's a chance. Obviously I can't predict the future, but he continues to rehab. He's not practicing with the team yet. I mean, it's 2.5 years and you're not practicing with the team in early March. Like we're going to continue to take it week by week here, but he is grinding. He is doing everything he can. It's just like, I didn't think June 26th, 2022, that the injury would be 3 years, right? So I don't know, there's no playbook for this. We'll just continue to chip away at it, and he's doing everything he can. That I know. So we'll see where it goes.
How disappointing is that, and how difficult does it make your job as a GM when you're trying to build a team to win a cup and go out and get these different parts when
it is what it is, right, Rach? It's a challenge of the job. I think everybody goes through it. Every team every year goes through injuries. For me, it's more what he's going through, and this guy's he's an unreal hockey player. I can't even imagine how he's dealt with this day in, day out. A game he loves, how good he is. And he's a young guy, right? Like he's not 35, 36, and he's like, you know what, I can look back and played 15, 16 years, and he's right in his wheelhouse. So for me, I hope it's going to happen for him. But obviously, it's been a while, right? But if anybody can do it, I think it's Gabriel Landeskog, and I think not only me, Bedsy, our players, and organization. I think the hockey world wants to see it, right? You want to see him get back out there and and see how he can do. I think everybody's behind him. So but yeah, it's challenges just for us, Joe, Bedsy, it's something you got to deal with, right? And so we deal with it the best we can.
So there you go. There's Chris MacFarland today addressing Gabe Landeskog and where he's at. Now, here's what I'll tell you guys. This is just what I know. I know Gabe Landeskog does continue to skate, and he is continuing to work his way back, or at least he hopes in the direction of back. Like C-Mac said there, if there's any hockey player I think can do it, it's him. I do continue to hear from people that I know and trust and believe that Gabe Landeskog is, in Gabe's head, he is still working his way to coming back. I did get a DM today from someone saying, hey, look, after a lot of this kind of came out, saying, hey, take it with a grain of salt. We don't know, but, giving me some more positive updates in terms of what's going on with Gabe Landeskog. So look, I'm not going to be the one to sit here and say he's coming back, he's not coming back, he is, he isn't, this, that, and the other. But people are picking up on it in the chat. When Chris MacFarland said you guys can get a sense of where this is kind of heading, that definitely was, we've all talked about it after. That was the line that I think kind of got a lot of people hung up. Is that alluding to, you guys know where this is heading? He's not coming back this season. You guys know where this is heading. It doesn't look like he's going to make it back. I'll leave that up to everyone else to interpret. The one thing that I am done doing is trying to make interpretations based off of what we see and hear with Gabe Landeskog. I'm going to let this process play out. Chris MacFarland said it there. Gabe Landeskog has earned the right. He's earned the right to do this. I'm actually just realizing I may have cut that out of that particular clip. Gabe has earned every bit of time he wants to come back. The way the organization views him, they're going to allow him that opportunity. So the organization is not going to cut things off at any point. But we'll see. We'll see what happens here. Like I said, you can hear what Chris MacFarland said and fill in the gaps the way that it sounds to you. But here's how we're gonna do it, guys. I'm gonna cut here to our interview with Evan Rawal and Aarif Deen, and that will take us home the rest of the way. Megan and I will be back more this week, and we will have a trade deadline show coming up for you guys on Friday. We're figuring out the logistics of how exactly we want to do that, because we will have practice for you as well. We'd like to do something live as the deadline is hitting, so we will keep you guys posted as the week wears on here. But that'll do it for me, kind of. You're going to get to hear a lot more of me talking with Evan Rawal, Aarif Deen from the Avs practice facility, filmed here just a little bit earlier this afternoon, about an hour and a half ago. So Aarif Deen, Evan Rawal, Evan, Denver Gazette, Aarif Deen, Colorado Hockey Now. Make sure you guys are following them. But should be an interesting week as we head towards the deadline here. Let's check in with my great friends, Evan and Aarif. What's going on? Jesse Montano, joined by Evan Rawal of the Denver Gazette, one of the best in the biz. Evan, we just got done hearing from Chris MacFarland. The Avs wrapped up practice. We got to talk to Chris MacFarland. We're 4.5 days out from the deadline. They've made their moves. I guess before we get into the stuff that Chris talked about, what's the sense that you have right now? Do you think there's more moves coming? I mean, Chris kind of tried to play coy a little bit, but there's more moves coming down the pipeline.
He's not going to tell us anything. I think there's one more move at least coming. And I think it's up front. I think they're looking at forwards if they can. I think the problem now is that they, as is the case usually at this time of year, they don't have a lot of assets to throw around. Yeah. So they're kind of limited by what they have to trade. But I do think if they can add a forward, they're going to want to do that. Yeah, that's the one spot they still. I know you added Jimmy Vesey, but that's not really addressing anything up front. We did ask him about Ryan Lindgren. Both him and Jared Bednar have been pretty honest about the fact that the analytic numbers are not great, but they both seem – one, Chris said that they were attracted to the warrior mentality and just the sandpaper and the grit. But they both seem pretty adamant that, hey, we know those analytic numbers aren't great. We think we're going to use them in a way that's going to help improve that. I mean, do you get the sense that this is the big move on defense that they're going to make, or – It sounds like it, and especially with Manson, it went from he doesn't have a timeline to, oh, he might be back this week. So yeah. that's good. You just always have to kind of be prepared for him to get hurt again. So I could see this being the guy because he's played on the top pair for the last 5 years in New York. So the big word he said there, which I expected to hear, was character. Yep. Like they clearly value his character. And then also it's pretty clear that they don't think they're hard enough to play against. And that's why they went out and got this guy. The analytics away from Adam Fox are what they are with him. I think the Avs, Jared kind of took a shot at like, hey, you know what, maybe we value things differently than the way the Rangers do. One number that did stick out looking at his numbers is retrievals. He's very good at retrievals, and I know the Avs, that's something they do value, but I think it's more that they want a guy that they can trust. They trust him, and especially on the penalty kill. I think he was averaging almost 3 minutes a night with the Rangers, and anything they can do to take some off of Cale's plate, like they give Cale the day off. Like I think they're wanting to kind of take some off that guy's plate.
Well, and not only Ryan Lindgren, Jared Bednar is quick to point out that Jimmy Vesey is a penalty killer as well. So like you said, that's clear that was part of what they were trying to do with that deal. But like you said, the character, the sandpaper, the grit. Mm-hmm. I also thought it was interesting how Chris MacFarland specifically called out, we could use him with Cale. Mm-hmm. We could play him with Oliver Shillington. We can play him with Sam Malinsky. We can put him with Josh Manson. I think they see a lot of versatility in this guy since he did come from playing in a system where he was playing next to Adam Fox.
Yeah, I actually expected him to play with Sam Girard tomorrow. It doesn't look like that's going to happen, but I think that's kind of a player that he would fit well with, who can do a lot of the work as far as moving the puck goes for him. And it's not a top pair role, where it's a little bit down from where he's been playing. So I think he's a guy like that. And then Jimmy Vesey, like, I think Corey and I were joking, he's the American Kiviranta. Like, I think he's going to become that guy where it's just like, yeah, you kind of know what you're going to getting, but a coach just trusts a guy like that. So,
and he does have some finishing ability. Like we talked to Peter Baugh the other day, he's had multiple double-digit goal-scoring seasons, so it's not like Jimmy Vesey doesn't know what to do with the puck around the net. But so look, let's look at it. I'm with you. I think they're going to add another forward up front. The splashiness of how big that trade ends up being, I think, is what's still left up in the air. I think it's anywhere from you're flipping Casey Middlestat plus something to bring in a bigger name to, we're going to make some tweaks and see if Casey can get going, because Chris MacFarland did point out we really liked Casey Middlestat last year.
Yeah, in the playoffs he was great. When Middlestat was asked about, because my question was just basically going to be, do you see him as the 2C going to the playoffs? But it's hard to answer that question. Just he's been so up and down, and there's been a lot of downs, unfortunately. So I could see a situation where they try to replace that spot. It's just that, like I said, they don't have a lot of assets, and also there's just not a lot of guys that I'm looking at are like, is that guy definitely better than Casey Middlestat? Like, the one name that's out there that is probably an upgrade would be Brock Nelson, but then you're looking at upgrading a 26-year-old for a 33-year-old who's on an expiring contract, and then you're looking for another second-line center again down the line. So,
and he looks a lot older than 33 in that.
Well, that is true.
That photo.
That is very true. And then the other thing I thought about was like, hey, what if they just completely change the makeup and just say, okay, we just want to be harder to play against, and what if we just go get a guy like Yanni Gourde or Trent Frederick or somebody like that? So those are always options, but I don't know if that makes you better. It just makes you a different team to play against.
And let me ask you, because the name that's out there that most people are talking about, and you and I even talked about it in a different sense this morning, Ryan O'Reilly.
Yeah.
Is that and I can, judging based off the face you just made when I said that is not really something that's interesting to you?
It is interesting to me. It's just I don't think he's going anywhere. That's the only thing. And I also wonder, like, if there are maybe some hard feelings because there are still some people around them.
Yeah.
But he would be, to me, an immediate upgrade, where people thought that contract would age poorly, and it's aged just fine. Like, he only makes, I think, $4.5 million. It's just a matter of, I think Nashville is like, we're not giving him away unless you are giving us a lot, and I don't think that's going to happen.
Because I was going to say, if you're flipping Casey Middlestat, hypothetically, if you went like 1-for-1 for O'Reilly, I'm with you. I think you actually are getting an upgrade, and you're getting a little bit cheaper at that position, which could position the Avs to do something else as well. But that was one thing I thought about asking Chris MacFarland, but we knew he wouldn't comment on it. I'm with you. There's just not a lot out there that's that exciting right now.
Yeah, and I'm still stuck on because when I asked him in St. Louis about that after the game, and he said, we're not a high-flying offense anymore, Jared did. And it's just like, okay, maybe they want to build towards a team where it's like, okay, well, we have the top line. Let's go get a bunch of guys that are tough to play against. We still have, like, Val on the second line and Druin who can provide some skill, but let's get some guys that are just tough to play against and make us a harder team to play against in the playoffs, where maybe we're winning 3-2 instead of 5-3 or something like that.
Yeah.
So I just wonder if that's a possibility where they go.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I the one thing that's clear is that they have changed the philosophy with the way that they're approaching things. I mentioned it in one of my questions to Chris, like, this feels very Pierre Lacroix, early 2000s. Like, any move that's out there to be made, they're trying to make it. Any player that they don't like the way they're playing, they're shipping him out and replacing him right away. So it's going to be interesting, like you said, to see if they do decide to take a different approach, get a little bit harder to play against, and move away from that super high-flying style. I don't know. One other thing I want to ask you about before I let you get out of here, Gabe Landeskog was a big topic of conversation today. I don't know if bleak is the word that I want to use, but that definitely felt like the most sobering update we've gotten in a while. Do you agree?
Yeah, and I mean, he even said it, like, you guys can see where this is at. It's like, yeah, we can. We haven't seen him skate in weeks. Like, he hasn't joined the team for practice. Like, I think at this point, everyone knows he's not coming back in the regular season, and it even sounded like it's probably not going to happen in the playoffs.
Yeah.
What I found interesting was that when he was asked about, finality moving forward, and he's like, Gabe has earned the right. I think if I was in his position, I'd want to be like, I need to know. Like, it's been 3 years.
Right.
Like, I need to know so I can do my job in the summer. But it didn't sound like he's coming back this season. I wouldn't even hold my breath for the playoffs. Like, maybe one game where they throw him out there,
Right.
To let him say goodbye, if anything.
Mm-hmm.
But
To say that he did it.
yeah. But at this point, it's been 3 years. Like, how do you throw a guy into the lineup like that in the toughest time of the year? It's just difficult to see.
This is increasingly having more and more Steven Stamkos, Tampa Bay bubble vibes where, if you can build a team that can carry you all the way to a conference final or a Stanley Cup final, and you can get Gabe Landeskog in for a game, for a shift, 2 shifts, that's more of what it's feeling like to me. But I'm with you. I did find it interesting how he really said, like, nope, he's under contract, and for as long as he wants to keep trying this, we're going to let him keep trying.
Yeah. That might be what he's saying publicly. I don't know if that's what's going to be the case privately, but it was interesting.
Do you have a final prediction for what they do this week? Do you think it's just one more move they ultimately end up, not counting the small little, minor league moves that they always make on deadline day?
I definitely think they're going to make one more move. They just don't have enough assets to, I think, make more than that. The minor thing is like, this seems about the time Oscar Olausson heads out the door. It's been a few years. That's kind of the move they always make. But I think one more move, and I asked about Jared, and I was like, because fire Jared's all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like, nope, that's not going to happen. If you heard the way he talks about him, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, Chris MacFarland said that Jared Bednar is, in his opinion, not only one of the best coaches in hockey, but one of the best head coaches in all of pro sports. So, like you said, anybody that's on the Fire Bednar hashtag, you might want to find a new hashtag. I don't think that one's coming to fruition anytime soon. I don't know. I'm with you. I don't think that they're going to rest right here. I think if they don't end up making a move, it won't be for lack of trying. And I don't know. I'm still hearing that they're open to doing something at 2C, but you've got to find something that you think is a clear-cut, obvious upgrade over Casey Middlestat for you to do that. Otherwise, you've got a young player who's got a contract for next year. Why mess with it? So we'll see.
Yeah, or just change the way you play. Because Joel Kiviranta's on their third line. I don't think they want that moving forward. I think they want somebody, if they can find another piece there, they're going to make that move.
So this is the last question. It's more of a yes or no. Let's say they don't make another move, or they make a depth move up front. Is this a team that can compete to you?
What's Val's status on April 20th?
Let's say Val is in. And he sticks around for however long the playoff run is.
If Val is in, I have come around to the idea that this is a cup contender. And a lot of that is because I think the NHL is in a spot where there's like one great team.
I so agree with this.
I think there's just a lot of good teams. And the teams in the West just aren't, like Dallas doesn't have Miro Heiskanen, and they don't know if he's going to come to the playoffs. So there's just so many X factors here. Where
a lot of flawed teams.
There's just, especially in the East, like obviously that's a different thing. I think the West is tougher, but I just don't think there's a lot of great teams where if Val is there, I would say the Avs are probably in as good a spot as any team to maybe go on a run here. I just don't know if he's going to be there, just like everyone else.
The ultimate asterisk. Well, that'll be another question for Chris MacFarland when we get into the summer, what they're doing with Val. But we're expecting to hear from him again at some point this week. Thanks for parking a little bit of time here. I know this has already been a long day at the rink. Evan Rawal, Denver Gazette. All right, now joined by Aarif Deen, Colorado Hockey Now. Aarif, we were supposed to have you on the pod the last couple of weeks.
It's not working out.
Not working out. Glad we were able to catch up. We just got done talking to Chris MacFarland. We are, 4.5 days here from the deadline. Let me ask you what I asked Evan. Just kind of broad strokes based on what you heard from Chris MacFarland. What are you thinking about this week? What are your expectations here between now and Friday?
I think they're going to make a lot of moves.
All right,
and the reason why I say that, if they're not making a lot of moves, they're trying to make a lot of moves. And the reason why I say that is because Chris MacFarland in the past has been very conservative with how he approaches his responses, saying things like, we like the team, we're confident in our guys, but if we see an opportunity, we'll strike. Those are usually the kinds of things he says. Today he was asked about the state of the team. He said, we're obviously have been trying to get deeper on offense. Now we're trying to get deeper on defense with the Ryan Lindgren trade.
Yep.
But then he went to say something along the lines of, I think we're not entirely satisfied with this roster.
Yep.
That says to me, Chris MacFarland is looking at the cameras and saying, more is coming. We are not yet done with making this roster the type of roster that we need to win a Stanley Cup.
Yep, I'm with you. What I told Evan, because Evan said, well, I think they make at least one more. And I said, I agree. I think they at least make one more. But I agree with what you just said maybe it is just one more. I think they've got a lot of gears in motion right now. They're trying to make multiple things happen. If you're in Chris MacFarland's seat, what is your top priority, even after adding Ryan Lindgren, who I like their response to the fact that, hey, we're going to use him differently than what has led to some poor results. What's your top priority here between now and Friday?
I go back and forth between two things, and I think you can probably connect them both into the same kind of trade, because we've seen trades in the past where teams go for a bigger player and then get a lesser player in the same deal. And I'll give you an example. But the two things that I keep going back and forth on are, number one, upgrading the second-line center position. It's been a thing we've dealt with the whole year. Middlestad's got 33 points in 61 games. He had 13 in the first 10. Quick math. Middlestad has 20 points in his last 51 games.
Yep.
That's pretty much Ross Colton's season. We look at Ross Colton's season and we say he's been a disappointment, 20 points in 44 games. Middlestad's got 20 points in his last 51.
Yep.
So upgrading the second-line center mixed with bringing in another depth forward, because you know the Avalanche. Number one, having Jimmy Vesey is great, because now, I don't know if you listen to my podcast. If you don't, you better.
Of course I listen to your podcast, Aaron.
Ringside with Aarif Deen, presented by Mile High Sports. I've been talking for months about the fact that I love having Yoel Kiviranta. I love having Parker Kelly. These guys are strong players that give you a lot of help and depth on the fourth line. However, my least favorite thing about the Avs roster is nobody is challenging those guys for ice time. They don't have a Nico Sturm and a Nicholas Aube-Kubel sitting on the lineup.
That's a great point.
2022, Nicholas Aube-Kubel and Nico Sturm were not regulars. They would have been regulars on this roster. So bringing in Jimmy Vesey, breathing down your neck if you're Miles Wood or Yoel Kiviranta, you better get out of that scoring slump or someone's going to take your spot for a game. You will be healthy scratched. So bringing in a depth forward to push Kiviranta back to the third pair, to also push another guy into the press box with Jimmy Vesey as the extras. Is it that? Is it Ryan O'Reilly? Or, this is a long-winded answer, I'm sorry.
Hey.
Do you do what the Toronto Maple Leafs did a couple years ago?
I'm so glad you brought that up.
They got Ryan O'Reilly, and in the same deal, oh my goodness, his name's not coming, Noel Acciari. They got Noel Acciari. So they solved both in the same deal. They got the second-line center. They also brought in another depth forward.
Well, so damn, you mentioned a few things there. I'm going to try to hit on all of them. I'm glad you mentioned the Maple Leafs from a couple years ago, because that is a team that, again, I've thought a lot about when it comes to this group here, because there is a good chance, Aarif, that we do see a lot of turnover here, and that we do see, come Friday, a very different looking roster. It's not guaranteed. It's not for sure, but I think that is a possibility. Two, the thing about Kiviranta, Megan gives me a hard time because she thinks that I really don't like Yoel Kiviranta. It's like, it's not that I don't like Yoel Kiviranta. In the playoffs last year, very great, very usable player. Good effort. Also, he's not supposed to be an every night guy. That's the problem, is he's not supposed to be an every night guy. And to your point, not only is he an every night guy, he's playing up the lineup. That is what I think is part of the issue with where the Avs are at in terms of depth up front. But let me ask you this: so you said that you think that they still do need to address the Casey Middlestat situation on the second line, as well as a depth forward. How do you feel about the D? Are you satisfied with the defense with the addition of Ryan Lindgren? You and I were talking a little bit in the locker room. Do you think that we're assuming health with all of these conversations?
Yeah.
Assuming health for Josh Manson, are you okay with what they've got now, or would you like to see one more piece?
One more piece. And that's why the very first thing I said was they're going to do a lot, because there's a scenario you and I were talking about. Do you trade Josh Manson? I don't think so. I think that's a summer offseason move, because having Josh Manson healthy now, whether he's your second or your third pair guy, I know Bednar said he'd rather not play him with Lindgren, but I don't think they wanted to play Jack and Eric Johnson together. That just kind of happened how it happened. I also love that Chris MacFarland went out of his way to say, you can try Lindgren with Cale Makar. You can try Lindgren with Josh Manson.
I agree.
So that says to me, bring in another right-shot defenseman, someone who isn't a clear-cut third-line, third-pair right-shot defenseman, but someone who can shift with Manson. Let Manson play with Girard. Manson's struggling, you're doing a little swap-a-roo right there. You're going to put the new guy up there with Sam Girard. All I'm saying is Sam Malinsky, Oliver Shillington, if those guys are on your roster, it's probably going to be one of them as your number 7 defenseman. You need to go 2 injuries deep before you go past those 7 guys. That's kind of the thing that I think when you're building an NHL roster for the Stanley Cup playoffs. So we saw this last year before Drouin got hurt in Game 82, and then Nichushkin got suspended when Drouin came back, and all the things that happened. You have to have a 13th and a 14th forward that you not only can trust to put into the lineup, but you can trust to put in the lineup and play them 10 to 13 minutes. You need a number 7 defenseman that you can trust to put into the lineup and play them 13 to 16 minutes. So not Keaton Middleton, because you only play him 10 minutes a night.
Right.
Sam Malinsky. So that's kind of the way I was going. Juuso Parssinen, I never thought of Juuso Parssinen as a 13th forward when Val came back, because Juuso always came off to me as a guy that if he needed to play in the playoffs, he's playing 5 minutes, and Nathan McKinnon's getting double shifted.
Well, and Juuso Parsson's not, right, to your point, he's not the kind of guy that's going to give you those 5 hard minutes.
VC is.
Right, that's what I like about the VC thing. All right, I've got one more based on something that you said, and I want to just get your quick thoughts on Gabe Landeskog after that. But you mentioned Miles Wood's name a second ago. He is a guy that Megan and I we keep coming back to. I don't know. The term might be hard to get another team to take it. Still 5 years beyond this one. But at just 2.5, that feels like a player that they do need it's clear they need an upgrade on it. Do you think it's going to be possible for them to get a deal like that done this week?
I think it can be possible, yeah, because I think. So let's go back to the Mikko Rantanen trade. That would have been an example of, like, we're giving up a lot of assets. Let's add this into the deal to make the money work. I wish they did.
Yeah.
I wish they did. But that's ultimately the kind of thing that needs to happen. You're not trading Miles Wood to a team for a 3rd-round draft pick or a 4th-round draft pick. But I don't know. I'm just going to make a fake trade out of the air. And I'm not saying this is going to happen. But if you're trading Casey Middlestad, a 1st-round draft pick, and a 2nd-round draft pick for, I don't know, Ryan O'Reilly and Colton Sissons, throw Miles Wood in there to make the money work. That's the kind of deal you need to do. With the Rangers, that would have kind of been my preference to Juuso Parssinen. But I think, again, this goes back to the case of Bednar saying, or Chris MacFarland saying, at least we can play Wood 9, 10, 11 minutes, even if it's reckless abandon.
Well, like when I look at Miles Wood, like I think Nashville is a good example. You know, Chicago, Anaheim, San Jose. There's plenty of teams that could benefit from. I mean, Miles Wood, he works hard. He's a veteran in this league. He's not a useless player. And really, as the cap continues to go up, 2.5 is not a lot of money. I think there's plenty of teams out there that you could get that, like you said, as maybe it's a 3rd team that you're pulling in to make money work and everything. But I think you could do it some way or the other.
Do you remember when Chris MacFarland had his press conference July 1st, 2023, what he said about Miles Wood's contract?
Refresh my memory.
He said we gave him more term to lower the AAV. Look at the structure of his contract. Last year he made $3.25 million. This season he's making $3.25 million. Year 3 he makes $2.5. Years 4, 5, and 6, $2 million. What does that tell me? That tells me they wanted Miles Wood for either a 2-year, $6.5
That's a tradable contract.
2 years at $3.25 million per year, or 3 years at 6.5 plus 2.5 at $8 million, $9 million. That tells me that they either wanted 3 times 3 for $9 million or 3.25 times 2 for $6.5 million, knowing very well that either in year 3 or in year 4, they're going to trade this contract because it is a lot more tradable to a team like Chicago or San Jose or even Columbus after the Johnny Gaudreau tragedy that needs to reach the cap floor. So you don't got to pay him a lot of money, but he'll eat up $2.5 million on your salary cap. So I still think Miles Wood has value in that sense. I don't think it's a Ryan Johansson situation where you need to attach a first rounder to get rid of him because he's a useful,
and it's not that much money.
He's a useful player. It's not $2.5 million of a deadweight guy that you can't play. It's $2.5 million of a guy that will be useful for your lineup one way or another.
And then last one, just kind of quickly, because Evan and I did talk about it, but you were prying with CMAC on the Gabe Landeskog situation. Evan and I were both kind of in agreement. That felt like the most sobering update that we've gotten so far on Gabe. Did you feel the same way?
That's why I kept asking about it. And I kind of wish that the press conference was, and I'm not calling out other media, but I kind of wish it was set up in a way where it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions all in a row about Landeskog. Because as soon as you leave and you come back to a topic, you're not going to get the same kind of unfiltered response of if you keep hammering away at it, one after the other. Chris MacFarland said, I think you guys know where this is going, but hope it goes well. When he was asked to follow up later, he said, there's a chance, hope. There's a chance, breath, hope that Landeskog plays again this year. He's making it clear to me that they have officially reached a world where they're not expecting him back.
At all, you mean, or this season?
At all.
At all?
The way that I see it is this. We are going to, Landeskog's on our books. He makes $7 million a year for the next 4 seasons after this. Every single season, Landeskog will be on the books. I also think that if he does not play in the playoffs this year, there will be a new captain in September.
Ooh,
However,
there's a hot take.
I do believe that. If Landeskog does not play at all this season, if you enter September 2025 training camp and you don't have a healthy Gabriel Landeskog, there will be a new captain on the team. However, Landeskog won't go LTIR like Chris Pronger or all those other guys. He'll go LTIR of, in 2 years from now, if you make it work, great. We'll pull you in the playoffs, or if we have an extra $10 million because we're one of those teams that is going to be more budget in the rising salary cap, and we can just fit you in. We'll play you in. Hey, remember our captain that hasn't played in 5 years? He's coming back. He's going to play 9 minutes a night. That's the way that I think they're going to go with Landeskog. If he doesn't play again this year.
Yeah, I mean, Evan and I won't repeat myself too much, but Evan and I were saying, to me, that was clear that he's not coming back in the regular season, obviously. They're using that money, and that this really was the hope is maybe we can do the Steven Stamkos thing and get him in a game.
Get him in a game, let him have that one final moment.
And say that he did it. He came back. He worked all the way back and got it in an NHL game.
My best case scenario, the worst case scenario for Gabriel Landeskog is he gets 100% healthy and sucks. That's the worst case scenario. Best case scenario for Gabriel Landeskog, he works his way back. He gets back into a game. He gets the home crowd to cheer and roar and tears and emotions. He gets to score maybe 1, maybe 2 goals. Maybe he wins the Stanley Cup. That's aiming high. Forget the Stanley Cup part. He gets that. He plays 7, 8, 9 games, 3, 4, 5 games, and then he can shut it down and say, I did it.
I did it. Yep.
He does the Peter Forsberg thing in 2011. I came back, I gave it all I can, and now I know I am at peace with this being over. But more than Peter Forsberg, Gabriel Landeskog deserves that
I'm with you.
number 92 roar from Alan Roach at Ball Arena. Gabriel Landeskog, the cheers, the fans, the signs. He deserves that moment. I hope he gets it, and then he can call that a career.
Well, and he deserves the opportunity to work his way back, as Chris MacFarland said. He's Aarif Deen, Colorado Hockey Now. Trade deadline coming up this week. We'll see what the Avs got going.